JavaScript developers have access to most of the Visual Studio debugging tools. There are also some JavaScript-specific tools. To demonstrate this, I've opened this solution, Debugging JavaScript. It contains two projects. This first project contains an HTML file, which has some script. The second project is a Windows Store app that's written in JavaScript. Both of these projects have JavaScript, which will allow me to show you some of the JavaScript debugging tools. Let's start with pagewithcode.html. Inside this HTML, I have a div tag, which is marked as ID content, a div tag, which is marked as ID div1, and an input tag with the ID of button1, which has this onClick handler. The onClick handler calls this function called showMessage, which I wrote up here in my own chunk of JavaScript. Here it is. It's called showMessage, and it takes an inbound parameter. It finds an element on the page by calling document.getElementById. Yes, I know some of you are thinking I should have used jQuery, but for this demonstration, I'm using the normal DOM. I'm also getting the element by ID. I'm using this first element and finding its inner HTML and then applying the message. So when I run the application by pressing F5 and clicking on this debug JavaScript, notice I'm on this page, pagewithcode.html. Click here. It outputs the word hello into that div. Now I want to debug this, so I'll switch back to Visual Studio, open this code, and put a breakpoint here on line 11. Press F9 to add the breakpoint. Return back to my browser and click on the button again. Success. I hit my breakpoint. At this point, everything you know about debugging in Visual Studio applies. You can rewind the code by grabbing the yellow marker and moving it up a line, pressing F11 to step through your code. You can use the locals and watch windows and all of the call stack and immediate windows. Everything you've learned so far applies here. But there are also some special windows available when you're working with JavaScript. Let me show you these two special windows. They're in the Debug menu under Windows, and they have their own section. Here they are, the JavaScript console and the DOM Explorer. I already have these enabled in my computer. Here's the DOM Explorer. It's a tab next to my HTML page, and the JavaScript console is down here on the bottom of the screen. That's its default location. So what can you do with the JavaScript console? For one thing, you can use it to inspect the DOM or select elements in the DOM. Let's say I want to look for my button. I can come down here and type select, open paren, press enter. The JavaScript console works in conjunction with the DOM Explorer, and it highlights my button in the DOM Explorer. Let's try it with the div1 tag. Select div1. It works just like you'd expect. I can also use this to read information from the DOM Explorer. If you take a look at this div right now in the HTML page, I can get information about this div. Let's say this div here, but it's in a very obtuse format. I'd like to see it look more like it looks in the DOM. So what I can do is come over here and then type in content. Now what you see is it's showing me just that subset of the DOM. I can see the div tag, and if I want, I can click on this drop down to expand it and see the contents. Let's try that one more time. I'll type in button, 1, enter. And now I can just see the HTML for that button. We can also use these tools over in this Windows Store application. So let me stop the debugger, close this HTML page, switch over to this JavaScript Windows Store application. The main page in here is this default.html page. This contains the HTML that's used to render the UI for this Windows Store application. And the code for this lives over here in this JS folder. It's called default.js. You can see some code in here that is building up some data for a flip view control. For instance, look at this line of code here. There's a for loop here that is building a string for the flip image based on some images that I've imported here in this folder. It's going to build a string for abstract0.png, so that'll load this picture. Let's see what this application looks like when I run it, and then we'll debug it. I'll right-click, select the Set as Startup project item. Then I'll press F5 to run the application. Now this is supposed to be a full screen application, but because I have a bug in my code, I have this little tiny window up here in the corner. You you can sort of see what it's supposed to look like. I'm supposed to be able to click on these buttons and flip through my content forward and backwards. But the window is too small. Now I'm going to switch back to Visual Studio with Alt-Tab. And when I return, you see that the DOM Explorer and the JavaScript console window have automatically opened. So I can use the same kind of selection here. For instance, if I'm looking for this ID F view, I could use the select F view here, or I can just select it with my mouse. Now that I've got the item selected, I can come over here and learn more about that element. Here's the styles that are applied to the element. Here is the layout of the elements. I can see that it's set at 100px by 100px. It should be 100% by 100%. That's the issue with my small window. So I'll go to my attributes, find the style, and modify this first one. Change this to say 100%. Now I'm going to switch back to my running application. What you can see is the DOM Explorer is working live with the application as it's running on my desktop. Let me make one more change. I'll switch this over to 100% tab. Switch back over to here, and now I've got the full screen glory of this Windows Store application. In conclusion, the JavaScript debugging tools are very cool. Be sure and spend some time with the DOM Explorer and the JavaScript console.